All right, welcome everybody. Another edition, Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel. I'm Adam Benigni of WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo. Sal Maiorana, the Rochester Democrat Chronicle, and our man in the middle today, Luke Easterling of Athlon Sports, draft analyst for him, well-known guy. Luke, always interested, especially in this epic time that stretches from the combine to the draft, for fresh, informed perspective, and we know you got plenty of that. Thanks for being with us today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's a pleasure to be here and excited to talk. Again, anytime I get a chance to talk about any team, anything leading up to the draft, I love doing it. So excited to break down what Buffalo's approach is here.
All right. The last time Luke and I talked, I was in a hotel room in Indianapolis after one of the long days at the Combine, and we chopped it up a little bit about, what the Bills' needs are. And surprise, surprise, we're 2 months later, and the needs are still the same. They still need an edge rusher, probably a linebacker, maybe a receiver, and maybe a safety. So it's amazing how this works. But Luke, I forgot what the hell we talked about 2 months ago, but I'm sure we covered a lot of the guys we might get to today. But why don't we just start? You do a new mock draft once a week, I think.
Yes.
And the one that was dated April 10th, which I just looked at, you had a guy that I'm a little bit surprised, Dylan Theamman, the safety from Oregon. The reason I say that's a little bit of a surprise, man, it seems like 85% of the mock drafts I've seen have him not getting past the Vikings at 18, but you've got him going 8 picks later. Give me your rationale for that.
Yeah, I think, and this is kind of why I love to do a fresh mock every week, and I do 4 rounds every time. So I cover the top 140 picks, and I project my own trades. And so I like to do that because then you end up with scenarios like that where guys go earlier than you do in most mock drafts. Most mock drafts, they're they're 1 round and they don't do trades, right? And so I try to present, especially a year like this year where you got 5 teams that have multiple first-round picks, so you have a lot of teams that don't have first-round picks. So I like to go a little deeper. But one of the things it does is it leaves people on the board longer than usual because you've changed up the variables, right? You've changed up who's picking where and projected a few trades. And I was surprised as anybody to see Theamman still on the board there. And I'm like, man, sometimes I'll do that and I'll be like, there's no way. I got to find another place for him. I got to kind of start over and move him back. But I think the only reason that he could still be on the board in that range is just because the NFL is weird about drafting safeties high, like they are. And so, I could see a world in which Caleb Downs, Dylan Theamman, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, all 3 of those top safeties are all top 15, 16, 20 picks at worst. And I could also see a world in which the same league that didn't draft Derwin James until 17th, didn't draft, Kyle Hamilton until 14th, didn't draft Nick Emanwuri until the 2nd round last year. Maybe they do it again and they're like, hey, we're not going to take a 3rd safety before 2025. And so, there's precedent for that to happen. I just don't know when you look at his versatility, his athleticism. Obviously, blew up the combine, but it's all on tape. Like it reflects on the tape as well. He can line up anywhere. He plays the run at a high level. He plays the pass at a high level. Really smart kid. I don't think he gets to 25, but if he did, I think the Bills would be super, super happy landing him to pair him with Cole Bishop for the long haul. I think that'd be a huge steal for them.
Well, and the other thing too is
go ahead, Sal. Sorry.
They'd be in a perfect spot to draft him because they're covered this year with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So I mean, this it's similar to Cole Bishop. Cole Bishop had the injury in his rookie year that slowed his progress, but they also had there were some guys in front of him that he could learn from. Same thing with Theamman. I mean, Bishop's just starting to find his footing in the NFL. You've got Gardner-Johnson there. Theamman could come in with, it's a pretty good mentor. And, say what you want about C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he's a pretty good player. And that'd be a nice situation for the Bills. I understand the logic that you might be thinking there.
Well, and not only that, because you have the veteran guy there, you can get him on the field in creative ways, right? You can get all 3 of those guys on the field because CJ and Dylan can play nickel, so that both of those guys can play in the slot. So you can rotate people. You can do a lot of pre-snap, post-snap changes, and it gives your defensive coordinator a lot of creativity when you have multiple safeties that are versatile like that, and they can line up single high, they can line up in the box, they can line up in the slot, and it really it doesn't do any favors for the offense to be able to try to figure out what you're doing pre-snap when you can move those guys around and get them all on the field.
So that kind of fits right in with what we're hearing in general from Jim Leonard as the Bills' new defensive coordinator, how they're changing things up. I mean, Sean McDermott had a very, very complex, defense with specific type of roles within it. This obviously just in terms of its base with the 3-4 and what they're asking, they're looking for multi-dimensional players. And it seems like Theamman would fit that description. How much do you factor that in, whether it be safety or maybe some other positions you're considering for Buffalo, when you have a change at defensive coordinator like this, based on what we know about him and what he wants to do at this point? How much do you factor that in when you evaluate your mocks?
Yeah, I think you have to. And I think that, I try to do that as much as possible. I try to look at, patterns and usage and the body types and skill types that certain teams look for at those different positions. And it's a little more challenging when you have a coaching change, but you can always look back to, again, when that guy was a coordinator over here and what types of personnel did they like to use. I will say that I think it's becoming more and more popular to prioritize those versatile guys and prioritize that creativity. So I think it's a little more translatable than it used to be. I mean, 20 years ago, if you were doing this, it was like, this team is a 3-4 team. And they, these guys at all these positions look like this, particularly in the front seven. And if you're a 4-3 team, it's completely different. And there's not a ton of that anymore. Like, there's really not. Like, most NFL defenses are in nickel plus, like nickel, dime, something else other than base 60-70% of the time now, right? So it's a lot of defenses are looking for similar body types as opposed to 15-20 years ago. But there are definitely coordinators, again, like McDermott. I'm a Tampa guy, so Todd Bowles is kind of in this role as well, where like they have a very complex system and they ask very specific things of their guys and need them executed at a high level, which is, again, that's a challenge. Especially, you're talking about the draft, you're talking about young players coming in and trying to make an immediate impact. That's a lot to put on their plates right away and expect them to execute at a high level. I think the best coordinators in today's NFL game, today's NFL defenses, are the ones that try to make complicated things as simple as possible, especially for young guys, so they can play faster, think less on the fly. And you can still be complex in what you do alignment-wise and move things around, but if you make your rules as simple as possible, I think it allows your guys to play faster, play freer, and no matter where you line them up, they can be a little more successful in that way.
All right, so let's go edge rusher here, Luke, because I talked to Beane. I've talked to him a couple times actually, and I've asked him point blank about what he thinks of Greg Rousseau and where his fit's going to be, and he pretty much has come out and said he's going to be a stand-up outside linebacker. He's not going to be a defensive end in that 5 technique or even the 4-eye. He's going to be a stand-up guy, and that's what they signed Bradley Chubb to do too. They've also got Michael Hoyt, who will fill that role. But what they're still lacking, and I think you would agree, they don't have a true speed guy on that edge. They've got some guys that can rush the passer from the outside linebacker spots and even those 5 tech positions, but they don't have a speed edge rusher. They haven't had it for a while. I mean, Von Miller tried, but he was 35 years old when he was trying, and then he blew his knee out. So if at 26, they're still sitting there with that pick, I still believe the Bills want to trade down. But if they're still sitting there, who do you think is an edge rusher with that speed, bendy, bursty type of action who could still be there that might be a fit for the Bills?
I mean, the guy that jumps out immediately to me is Cashes Howell, and you want to talk about not Greg Rousseau. It's the complete different body type, right, where he's not the tall, lanky. I mean, everybody's talked so much about how he's only got 30.5-inch arms, but when you turn on the tape, man, he's got the juice. Like, he's so explosive off the ball. Those short arms don't seem to help anybody he's going against on in the SEC. That didn't seem to do much good. So I don't know that it'll be a huge deal at the NFL level either, but he's super productive. And doesn't just win with speed. Like, he's explosive. He's got great technique. His hands are really active. He knows how to get to the quarterback in a bunch of different ways. He'll set you up inside or outside and then counter you the other way. So he's a really smart, really polished and prepared rusher in terms of his plan. And a lot of times, especially with those speed guys, all we see is explosiveness. Like, you're flying off the ball, and if you run around the guy, great. If you don't, you're going to end up in the parking lot. And that's kind of how it works against NFL tackles early in those guys' career. I don't think Howell will have that problem. I'm a huge fan of Malachi Lawrence out of UCF. I don't know if he ends up in the first round. I think he's probably a high second round type of guy, but he is kind of that more of the tall, high cut, lanky body type with the long arms. But his explosiveness off the ball, he was a great combine performance that we got from him. And so he's a guy that I think maybe if they move back a little bit, I still think Lawrence goes higher than most people think, just because he was so productive as a rusher. He only had 7 sacks last year, but his pressure rate was through the roof. Like, he was wreaking havoc on opposing quarterbacks there in the Big 12. So that's kind of an under the radar guy, but I think Howell is the guy that most people are kind of aware of that would fit that mold and that role if they're looking for that pure, just get to the quarterback. And again, he's not just a speed guy, but he brings that to the table in buckets.
Give me your thought, because I wrote about this guy last week. I wrote about a few guys last week, but TJ Parker from Clemson, because he seems to be a guy who, again, I don't know that he's a true first-round pick. If the Bills had that second-round pick that they traded away, I think they would have some ammunition to maybe get up into the top half of the second round, and he'd be the perfect value fit. Is he a reach at 26, and is it even a fit for the Bills, you think?
Yeah, I think, again, now you're talking about more of a guy who's more of a traditional base end where he's got that kind of well-rounded skill set. He's almost like Ruben Bain Jr. light, in that he's really tough against the run. He can win with speed enough as a rusher. He can win with power enough as a rusher, but he's really just a well-rounded guy where you can probably keep him out there all 3 downs and be a base guy that doesn't have to come off the field unless he really needs to. And so I think there's a lot of value in that, because I think it gives him a really high floor. Maybe doesn't have the ceiling of some of those really explosive edge rushers that I mentioned already, or like a guy like Keldrick Falk, who's just like a ridiculous athlete, and maybe that gets unlocked finally at the next level. But Parker is a guy, just to let you know the value. I'm working on this week's mock draft, which is going to go up Thursday morning, and I've got Parker going 25th to the Bears, right ahead of him. So okay. I think that's where his range starts. And I think there's a lot of teams that are looking for that type of player that can stay on the field all 3 downs. If he gets to the second round, I don't think he lasts very long. I mean, in New England at 31 would be a spot for him. Tennessee high in the second round if they don't get an edge guy in the top 5. So I agree with you that if he doesn't go late first, he doesn't last very long in the second round. But in terms of value, I think that mid-20s is where you start to talk about him.
All right, so let's keep it kind of in the area of the defensive front here. We had Jerry Ostrowski, former Bills offensive lineman, on last week, and he was emphatic about who he thought the Bills should draft at 26. It was Kaden McDonald from Ohio State.
Yeah.
Right. And the discussion was, and it's a very interesting point, which is why I'm so interested in your take on it here, is that Deion Walker really isn't a true nose.
Nope.
That he's much more of a lateral play. It was really interesting to hear Jerry talk about it as a guy who, made his living in the trenches and that sort of a thing, of what maybe they lack and what they could really use in this new defense. Is McDonald a guy whose value merits the 26th pick? And we had this discussion on the show last night with Vic Carucci and John Scott of Channel 2, and they didn't feel like it was worth the price in terms of the first round. Where do you fall on McDonald and that position relative to what the Bills might need?
Yeah, I think, and I see both sides of the argument here, where it's, if you've got an interior guy who is purely a run stopper, who doesn't give you a ton of juice as a pass rusher, it's really hard to value that guy in the first round if you can't keep him on the field on third down. In a vacuum, like in a general kind of macro sense, I agree with that to a point. But if we isolate Kaden McDonald, the player, yes, he's a dominant run stuffer. And like you said, Walker, he's huge, but he's not a true nose. And part of it is because he's too tall. He's actually too tall to be a nose, because one of the most important things in play in that position is leverage. You've got to stay low. You've got to be the low man. You got to keep your pads low and control the point of attack. And it's just, if you're 6'6", 6'7", you lose from the get-go. Like, you lose right off the bat, because you're never going to be the low man. And that's going to be so hard to control those double teams and do those types of things. So they need somebody who, again, Kaden McDonald's 6'2". He's already down there. He's got natural leverage, and he's got so much power. Where I think he can take the next step is I think he's got a ton of potential as a pass rusher that really just, they didn't need him to do that at Ohio State. He's surrounded by so much talent, and I just think that he's got the opportunity, maybe not to be Dexter Lawrence. He may not be, flirt with double-digit sacks as an interior guy, but he's going to be a pain in the ass for a quarterback who doesn't want that interior pressure and forcing him to the outside. That's what you got to think about. It's not just about getting sacks. It's about disrupting the quarterback. And having played quarterback at not obviously at that level, but long enough to know that I would much rather have edge pressure than interior pressure. Edge pressure, I can step up into the pocket. interior pressure, I have to bail, and it ruins everything. It ruins the timing. It ruins my mechanics. I have to bail and find something else. But you're pushing the quarterback into your edge guys, and it makes them more productive. It makes them better. And so not only that, I will continue to pound the table just for the run stopping aspect, because what's the best way to get teams in 3rd and 7, in 3rd and 8, in 3rd and 9? It's to have that guy in the middle who's shutting down the run, who's allowing you only 1 or 2 yards of carry on the early downs and forcing you into those patching situations where you can bring in your edge guys, and they can pin their ears back and go to town. So, Kaden McDonald has a high second-round grade for me. I don't have 32 first-round grades. I rarely do. So everybody picking in that back, 6 or 7 of the first round is taking a player who might not necessarily have a first-round grade. I just think McDonald is one of those guys who's going to be boring in the best way as a run defender, and I think his upside as a pass rusher is more than you might think from a guy who's considered a traditional nose.
My argument for McDonald is really a pretty simple one. Everyone's talking about, he's not going to be a 3-down player. Tell me who's a 3-down defensive lineman today in the NFL. Max Crosby. Max Crosby plays 95% of the snap, but who else? The Bills under Sean McDermott were always a heavy rotation team. Nobody ever, very rarely, did a defensive lineman anywhere on that front play more than 60% of the snaps in a given season. So Kaden McDonald, to me, for a team that sucks against stopping the run, which they have for years, he's like the perfect fit for me. You get him on the field, 1st and 2nd down, and he comes off like every other team would take their defensive line run stuffer off the field on 3rd down. And the Bills have got some other guys who can fill in, and hold up against the run if a team does run on 3rd down, but get after the passer. I think Jerry O was right. I had talked about McDonald, going back to the combine when I talked to him at the combine. I thought, yeah, this is a guy who could fit the Bills because he fills an immediate need. Brandon Beane keeps telling us, Luke, and he's told me this 3 times, Walker can be a nose. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're trying to sell here, but there's no friggin' way that Deion Walker, and maybe he'll shock us. I can't see it. There's no way I could see that.
Yeah, it's wishful thinking, I think, a little bit on Brandon's part, but again, defensive line coaches will tell you have to earn the right to rush the passer, right? You have to earn the right to rush the passer. You have to put teams in 3rd and longs by stopping the run on early downs. Because if they never get to 3rd down at all, or they're always in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, you never get a chance for those edge rushers to eat at all, because they can just keep running the rock. And so if you want pass rushers to matter at all, you've got to have the ability to stop the run on those early downs. And Buffalo, like you said, was so bad at it last year that if the worst thing they do is come out of this first round with the best interior defensive lineman in this class, which I think Kaden McDonald is, and a guy who just elevates the floor of your defense by being able to know that we're not going to keep giving up 5, 6, 7 yards a pop on the ground. We know that we're going to get better there. And again, it's just a position that makes everyone else better. The value of that position is not limited to the player himself or his role. It's a role that if you have a really good player there, it makes everybody else's job easier. And you have to have that as part of the equation if you're trying to quantify that value.
All right. So
let me ask you about, we should move right to linebacker, because Adam and I have talked about how when they traded away that 2nd round pick, it has really made the projection for us trying to figure things out difficult, because they go from 26 all the way to 91 in the 3rd round. There's going to be 25 or 30 guys that would be probably great picks for the Bills in that range. Will they get any of them? Jacob Rodriguez is kind of my man crush in this draft.
I don't blame you.
I think he'd be a great fit in a lot of defenses, but I think particularly with the Bills. But do you think he has any chance of being there at 91 in the 3rd round?
If they want him, they better take him at 26.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right.
I think his conversation starts at 19 with Carolina.
Really? That early?
20 to Dallas. I think that's where that conversation starts. And again, to give you full disclosure, I have the Bucs trading back and taking him at 31 in this week's mock draft. I think that's how good he is. And again, I'm entrenched in Bucs fandom. Like, everybody in the Bucs world thinks he's getting to 46, and I don't think that's happening. I just think that's a pipe dream. I don't think he gets out of the top 50. I don't think he gets out of the top 40. There's too many teams even in the top of the 2nd round. The Jets at 44. You got the Saints there. You got the Giants there. If they don't take Sonny Styles at 5, he's too dynamic as a playmaker, and I just think intangible in terms of leadership and the presence and the energy he brings to the defense. I've got Arvell Reese as a linebacker, so he and Sonny Styles are my top 2 off-ball linebackers in this draft. But then it's Jacob Rodriguez. I've got him ahead of C.J. Allen from Georgia. I've got him ahead of Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas and everybody else. So I just again, Bucks fans, I think, are dreaming about him being there at 46. So that tells you how I feel about him getting to 91.
What do you think holds other draft guys back on him? Because I've seen him lasting into the 3rd round with some of these guys. What do you think is the big differentiation?
Part of it is depending on how you stack your board and whether you're just using pure metrics as opposed to kind of an eye test kind of feel on the football field. Because if you want to use certain things, it might convince you. There's a computer somewhere that might convince you that he's not a first round or top 50 player. I just don't see that on tape. I mean, I don't have a Heisman vote, but if I did, he would have been in my top 5 last year easily. I think he was one of the most impactful players in all of college football, regardless of position. On the tape, is there some inconsistency to figure out? A couple of missed tackles here, a missed assignment here? Yeah, there's some stuff there. That's why he's not a top 10 pick, because there is a flaw here and there. But everything that he needs to fix is coachable. And the things that make him the best and the special player, you cannot coach and you cannot teach. And I think those things, again, there might be somebody that convinces themselves that he's not a good enough athlete. I thought he proved that at the Senior Bowl and the Combine, that he's plenty an athlete. And he's a guy that, again, I kept finding fewer and fewer reasons to not make him the 3rd best linebacker in this draft behind those 2 top 5 guys. So the short answer is, Al, I don't know, man. I got no clue why people think he's getting into the 3rd round. I don't think he's that type of player. I think he's way too good.
I just feel like Sal and I have talked about this at length, but when you evaluate what they have, and like a Terrell Bernard, for example, if he's healthy, there's a case to be made, but undersized a little bit, right? And with now, some injury history sort of racking up on him, and Dorian Williams, we don't think that he's the answer. I think when you've got a new defensive coordinator and you need that position, right? And so I think that's an area, I think you're onto it. That's an area certainly for them to watch. It'd be interesting to see where they have him on their board. The big question involves the R word, right? Now, did they do enough? All we've been talking about, any draft discussion we have here has to include the receiver position, and it should, right? Did they do enough in terms of the DJ Moore trade, and do they have enough? Because I think one of the most frustrating things during the Sean McDermott era is, and this is, at the top of the list, are they maximizing what they have around Josh Allen? Are they giving him the best array of weapons, or are they relying on him too much? What's it going to take to get this team over the top? The offense has obviously been so productive, but the deep threat has been lacking. And when you've got a guy like Allen at quarterback with the arm he has, it's inconceivable, unfathomable to be having these discussions consistently, right, at this stage of Allen's tenure with the Buffalo Bills. Do you see receiver as an option despite the Moore trade at 26?
I think I do, and it's unfortunate because, like you said, if without that 2nd round pick, if you take a receiver at 26, man, you're not touching that defense until late in the 3rd round, and that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's hard to swallow. And the tough part about the DJ Moore trade is, I feel like in general it gives them another playmaker, and that's good. I don't think it fixed the problem, though. I don't think it gave them the type of receiver they really, really needed, because Keon Coleman hasn't been that guy. Like, they need a big athletic X who can beat press, who can be the 3rd down magnet when again, if you don't want to rely on Dalton Kincaid to be that guy all the time as your tight end. I need I need muscle. I need somebody who can, and that's why Denzel Boston from Washington continues to be a popular mock pick there, I think, because that's still the guy they need after getting DJ Moore. DJ Moore, I think, he's bigger and he's more explosive downfield than a guy like Khalil Shakir is, but he's still more of an intermediate guy who can make big things happen after the catch, as opposed to stretching the field with pure speed down the field. And he definitely doesn't bring the above the rim kind of capability that I think that offense still needs in terms of the red zone, especially. So that's why, again, it's hard for me not to give them Denzel Boston if he's on the board when my mock drafts happen, just because I think that offense still needs it, and you have to prioritize building around Josh. But if you do that, you've got to be so confident in your ability to kind of build the depth of the defense through the rest of the draft. And that's going to be so hard to do without that second round pick. And to go back kind of to the linebacker spot, that would have been such a beautiful spot to get one of those linebackers, Jake Golday from Cincinnati, Josiah Trotter from Missouri. They're all going to be gone by 91. The second tier of linebackers, 5, 6, 7 guys, I think they're all going to be long gone. Kyle Lewis, even kind of you want to talk about versatile, chess piece type of guys from Pitt, kind of a safety linebacker hybrid. I think he's gone before 91. So it's going to be, if they take a receiver there, it's going to be hard for the defense. But if you have to prioritize what Josh needs, he's still looking for that guy. Because again, Keon just hasn't been that.
So just let me give you one more follow-up here. I mean, with that scenario, right, what's the likelihood then that he does move back?
I think it's high. I think that's exactly what you would want to do to get something early in the third. If you're moving, I don't know if you're moving all the way out of the first round, but if you are, trying to pick up an extra, early 3 and maybe a 4 to kind of give you a chance, give you some options. Because I really love the depth of the edge class. I love the depth of the linebacker class, the depth of the defensive line. Like every position on defense has solid depth. So if I'm able to move back, and I'm pretty confident that the guy I could take at 26 is not going to be that much better than the guy I could take in the mid 30s. That's how I feel about this class. If I can do that and get an extra 3, an extra 4, I think that I would do that all day long if I'm Brandon.
I just wrote about Boston this morning for tomorrow's online, so the numbers are fresh in my head. Keon Coleman came out of college as supposedly this contested catch guy, right? According to PFF, it was 45.8% in college. Boston comes out of Washington, 61.1% contested catch rate with a really low drop rate, lower than Keon. So I think he's a better player. I've said to Adam a couple times on this show, probably the only way I think the Bills think about receiver in the first round is if they know they're going to trade Keon Coleman. They're going to trade him, get him off the roster, get whatever they can get, 6th round pick maybe, and then make the move at receiver. But I don't see either of those things happening. I can't see them picking a receiver, even though there's a lot of arguments for it. And I just don't think, with all the bullshit we've heard from Brady and Beane about how Keon's going to be on this team and we believe in him, to turn around and trade him that'd make him look pretty stupid. So I don't think it's going to happen. So let's talk about this then for receiver. Because I still think it's got to be defense first round. If they wait to 91, again, assuming no trades anywhere else, the receiver that people have brought up that will probably be there at 91 is this Ted Hurst. Now, I haven't written about him, so I don't have much background on him. But from what I've gathered, he's a great athlete, right? Is that kind of his calling card in college?
Yeah, I wrote about Ted Hurst this morning, so we're
okay. So there you go.
We're
You're
on
fresh.
the same page. No, I think. And again, I'm gonna preface this by saying I am not comparing these players to one another in terms of where they ended up, because that's apples to oranges and it's completely unfair. But I think 20 years ago there was a wide receiver that came out of Chattanooga and was a late 3rd round pick who was big, athletic, fast, dominated lower level competition, and Terrell Owens did pretty good for himself. That I'm not going to ever crown somebody a Hall of Famer because that's who he became. But as a prospect, that was the sell point. That was the elevator pitch for a guy like Terrell Owens in the 3rd round. He was a small school guy, but the traits are all there. He's huge, he's fast, he's athletic, he was dominant against lower level competition. And so let's give him a chance late on day 2 and see what happens. That's what a team is going to do with Ted Hurst, because that's the archetype that he brings to the table. Again, I'm not saying he's a Hall of Fame player. I'm saying as a prospect, those are the physical traits and the context that he brings to the table. It's the same thing Owens brought. So the film is really fun because, again, you can tell he's the best player on the field all of the time. And then the ability to measure, that's what the combine is great for, right? It's not the end all be all, but it gives you a chance to compare athletically. Are you on the same level as these guys that are playing at these Power 4 programs? And clearly he is, because his performance was fantastic. So I think he's a guy that gets me excited about his ability. I think he can play multiple positions. I think he can play the X, he can play the Z, he can move around and do a bunch of different things. Will there be kind of a learning curve as he adjusts to playing NFL competition as opposed to playing group of 5 competition? Then absolutely there will be. But I wrote about it this morning. I have my biggest offensive sleepers in this class that I wrote about at athlonsports.com this morning, and he's at the top of the list because I think I don't even know if he's much of a sleeper anymore, unfortunately, because I think so many people are finally talking about him. But he's just such a fun player to watch. If he's there on the board for them and they still need that type of guy, I think he'd be a great fit.
And all right, last thing I want to ask you about.
Okay, go ahead.
Last thing I want to ask you about on receiver is, because of the injury, the ACL, is it possible that Chris Bell was at 91? And if he is there, is it worth it for the Bills to jump on that, given the injury?
Yes, it's worth it, because there's not a chance in hell he gets to 91, I don't think.
All right. That's what I wanted to know.
He's a borderline first-round guy if he's healthy, and so I just don't see – I think his conversation probably starts New Orleans in the second. I think is perfect because he and Tyler Shuck are still really tight, and I think he's pounding the table for him. That doesn't always work, especially if you're a young quarterback that might not have a lot of pull in that building, but I think he'd be a great fit there. I think Philly, particularly if they move on from A.J. Brown at any point in the offseason, I think they could look at a guy like Chris Bell as a very similar skill set. And again, A.J. Brown was a mid-second round pick when he was coming out of Ole Miss. So I just think there's too many teams that need receivers, and he brings such a unique skill set to the table, 6'2", 220 plus, with that speed and that athleticism. And it's also, again, we don't live in the same world we did 15, 20 years ago where a torn ACL was the end of somebody's career and the end of their explosiveness. You know, the advancements in the way that is treated and the recovery and the rehab, you see guys come back from those injuries and still kind of be the same player. And so I don't think he gets anywhere near 91 personally. But there's a super deep receiver class. They're going to have no problem having a receiver they really, really like. Jacoby Lane is the guy from USC. If I'm at 91, I think I mocked him there last week. He's the guy if they want that X. He's 6'4", 6'5", glue, absolute glue for hands, really long arms, has a fantastic highlight reel of one-handed catches, had a great combine. I think he's the guy. If I'm at 91, I'd be really happy with him.
Yeah, see, that's kind of I mean, I just feel like defense is going to be a priority here. And because of the depth you just outlined, I mean, I think they address receiver, but I don't feel like if you know, you're pushing me, I don't feel like it's going to happen at 26.
Yeah, probably not. And again, the receiver class is so deep that you're going to have every type of receiver anywhere in the draft that you really want to go after. And so I think that's what they're missing. It's not necessarily a level of talent. It's a specific skill set. Again, you want to build that receiver room like a basketball team where you have a point guard and a 2 and a stretch 4 and a slasher and like all these different skill sets that you can get on the field and challenge defenses in different ways as opposed to having 4 or 5 similar skill sets. And so I think anywhere in this draft, 3rd, 4th, 5th round, if they want to go after and find size and find that kind of above the rim target, they're going to be able to find somebody that they can plug into that role and feel pretty happy about.
All right, Luke, thanks very much, man. You've really given us a lot to think about. FanDuel is the presenting sponsor for this show and others on the Believe Network. Super Bowl odds. I kind of asked all our guests about this. Bills 3rd right now behind the Rams and Seahawks at plus 1,000. Of course, the big reason behind that has to do with the fact that 17 is at quarterback. But there are some other questions, and as we wrap this up here, just a general take from you on this. You know, what's your take with Joe Brady is kind of a known entity in terms of his offense, right? But there's always a question when you're dealing with a first-time head coach. So is that too high to have Buffalo, or are they kind of right in that conversation? Does that make sense? And what's your take on maybe what the transition is to a new head coach in Brady from where you sit?
I think, again, the head coach thing can go either way because we said the same thing last offseason about Liam Cohen in Jacksonville, and they went 13-4. So clearly there's a blueprint for figuring this out and being able to nail it on the fly. I will say that's probably the exception and not the rule, to expect a guy to not just maintain his proficiency as an offensive designer and play caller, but to be able to do that while handling new responsibilities at a 30,000-foot level as the head coach and running the organization from that perspective, that's not an easy transition to make, to kind of keep all those plates spinning and spinning at the same level that you're used to. So I think it's always normal to expect a little bit of regression maybe and a little bit of a rocky road, especially early on. And I think the reason I think that's a little rich for me, giving them the 3rd highest odds, is just because I think we're being lulled into a false sense of security in the AFC after the down year that the Chiefs had, the down year that the Bengals had with the injuries that they dealt with. I think Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes are going to come back pretty pissed off, and I think Lamar Jackson is going to be that way as well with the way their season went. I I think it's going to be as hard as it ever was for him to get out of the AFC compared to what it's going to look like in the NFC. And so I think it's just going to be a murderer's row for whoever ends up emerging from the AFC. And I have enough questions about Buffalo, particularly on defense, and again with the coaching transition, to make me feel a little bit hesitant about putting them that high.
All right, Sal, anything else from you?
Nope, we got it. Thanks,
right.
Luke. Appreciate it, man. It's always great.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. That was a blast.
Done.
Thanks.
Hey, Luke, real quick, just where can people what's the best way for them to find your stuff? athlonsports.com?
Yeah, athlonsports.com. If you're old school like me, go pick up our magazine that we put out every year. I've been reading it since I was a kid, and now the fact that I get to write a good bit of it is just like one of my favorite things in the world. It's my favorite project to work on every year. So we got 2 covers this year, Mendoza on one, Caleb Downs on the other. Caleb Downs, we got an awesome one-on-one interview with him in there. But all the updated information you can find at athlonsports.com. You find me on Twitter at Luke Easterling. I love talking shop with the fans, love talking football, and yeah.
All right, good stuff.
Little known
Thanks so much
fact,
for your time.
little known fact, Luke. I write the Bills preview for the Athlon magazine every year.
Hell yeah, baby.
So
Let's go.
My man Rob
We greatly
Doxter got a hold of
appreciate
me, so I'm
Rob's
in there.
the king,
so you'll
man.
see me too.
We love
Great
Rob.
stuff.
All right, man. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it, guys. Take care.
All right, so for Sal Maiorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, and Luke Easterling, Athlon Sports, draft analyst Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Thanks very much for being with us here on Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel.